Hi, welcome to another lesson. Now we're going to talk about arrays. Arrays are ordered sequences of values, and these values can be of any data type, and they are separated by comma. So let's go to Visual Studio Code. Let's start by creating a variable called students. And now let's say I want to put the names of my students here. If I didn't use the array, I could do it like this. So I have a student called John, another called Mary, another called Paul. I'm going to save this. Let me do the console.log first. So students. Refreshing the page, we can see that this seems to be working, but now how do I know how many students do I have? If I try to do like students, by the way, we can access this variable from the console. So now that we created it in the code, we can access it from here, as we can see. So if I try to get how many students do I have using the length property, this is not going to work because strings are just going to count the number of characters. So I have no way of doing this. There's also no way that I can access each of the students and know their names. So this is a terrible way of storing a group of data. So this is why arrays are useful. Now, instead of using strings, we're going to start with braces. So open and close braces. This is what indicates an array. So now each of the elements of this array are going to be strings, and we are going to separate these values with a comma. So now we have the first element of this array, the second element, and the third element. Saving this and going back there, refreshing the page, we can see that now the console is already showing us that this is an array with 3 elements. If we do type of students, we can see that this is considered to be an object by JavaScript. So there's no data type called array, but in practice, this is actually a data type because you will see that objects, they have different behaviors. So now we know that we can do students dot length, and now it's returning the actual number of students. I can also get each of them. So if I want to get the first element of my array, I'm just going to do just like I do it with strings. So arrays are also ordered sequences of values. So the first student has an index of 0, and now it's going to return John. Here I have another example of an array of numbers. You can even have arrays of strings and numbers together. You can use any data type, even other arrays. So I've just put an example here where I created a variable called groups. So I have a few groups of students. So by looking at this array, which by the way is called multidimensional array because it has arrays inside arrays, can you guess what is the length of the groups array? If I create this in the console, let's do it now. If your answer is 9, this is not right because the groups array does not have 9 elements. It actually has 1 element, 2 elements, 3 elements. So if we do groups dot length, we can see that this array has 3 elements, and each of these elements are arrays. So if I try to get like groups, I'm going to get the second element, which has the index of 1. If I do groups with an index 1 dot length, now this array has 4 elements. So from this point on, we should be able to identify those things, look at arrays and understand their structure so we can work with them properly. Now let's see a few operations that we can do with arrays. I'm just going to use this example. So I'm just going to copy this and go to Visual Studio Code. We don't need this console.log anymore. So I'm just going to create this courses variable. Now refreshing the page, I have this variable right here. So it's an array of 3 elements. Now, how can I add elements to this array? Well, since arrays are an ordered sequence of values, it's important to decide if we want to add elements to the beginning or to the end of the array. So if we want to add elements to the end, we can just use the push method. So courses.push. This is a method, so we need parentheses. And inside parentheses, we can pass what we are trying to add. So in this case, let's create a JavaScript course. Don't worry about the numbers that show here. Sometimes when we type commands in the console, you can see that these methods, normally they return something. So you can see that methods are actually functions. Now you should be recognizing that this is an argument of this push function, and it is returning something, which is the new length of the array after the push. This is not important to us. It's not important what it returns. It's important what it does. So now if we call the courses array again, we can see that now we have 4 elements and JavaScript has been added to the end of the array. If we want to do the opposite, add elements to the beginning of the array, instead of doing push, we can do unshift. Now let's add bootstrap. Now our array has 5 elements, and we've just added bootstrap to the beginning of the array. We can also do the same thing with the leading elements. So removing the last element of the array is going to be the pop method. So courses.pop. We don't need to pass any arguments because it's just going to get the last element of the array. So it just returned the element that was removed. Now if we check the variable again, we can see that JavaScript is not there anymore. And the same thing, if we want to do at the beginning of the array, the name of the method is going to be shift. So now it's going to remove bootstrap. And we can check how is our array. So we've just removed the first element. We can also redefine array elements. So at this moment, the index 0 is this HTML. We can do like courses and then the index we want to change, so 0, and then we can redefine a different value. So let's say HTML/CSS. And now we've just changed the first element. First, let me just clear this so we can see it better. Another interesting thing we can do is slicing. So we are going to use slicing to extract part of an array. So now let me just copy this variable. And let's say I want to get the first 3 students. I can do students.slice. And then I can choose where I want to start. So I want to start at index 0. Just one thing to pay attention is that the start index is included. So if I start at 0, it is going to get Peter, which is the first. But the end element is not included. So if I want to get Peter and Joanna, I need to go up to index 2. So 0, 1, and 2, because the end index is not included. So doing like this, we just got Peter and Joanna. It's just something that we need to pay attention. So if we want to get up to Julio, what do we want to do? 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the end element is never included. So 4, we are going to get up to Julio. If we don't include the second number, then we can get until the last element of the array. So we can do it like this. Just use the comma and omit the second value. So if we want to get from Joanna until the end of the array, we can start at 1 because the first index is included. So it's getting Joanna, and we don't declare the end index, and it's just going to get all the students up to the end of the array. Another interesting thing we can do is using negative numbers. So if I want to get the last 3 students, I can declare the first one as -3. So now this one is -1, Marie, Kate is -2, Julio is -3. So I'm getting from -3 to the end of the array. By doing this, we can get the last 3 elements of the array. Just one last thing worth mentioning, since strings are also sequences, you can apply the slice method to strings as well. So let me clear this. So if I create a variable, let's say IBAN, which would be for an international bank account, we know that the first 2 characters of the IBAN is going to be the country code. So an IBAN would look like this. So in Portugal, for example, it would be PT50. Actually, it's not the first 2 characters, but the first 4. So this indicates the country. Then comes all these numbers for the account number and all that. So this is our variable. Now, how can we get the country code? The country code is the first 4 characters. So we can apply slicing to strings as well. So we could do IBAN.slice, and then we can get it from 0 to 4. 4 is actually the 5th character, but we know that the second value is not included, so it's just going to be these 4. So by doing this, we are able to extract the country code from an IBAN number. So these are some examples that I wanted to show you. Again, what's the use of everything we've done with the arrays? Well, now that you know how they work, how can you add or remove elements? How can you get its length? How can you get specific elements? How can you extract part of it? When you face a problem involving arrays, you won't have any trouble to solve them, as you will see in the next list of exercises. So that was all for this lesson. In the next video, we're gonna talk about objects. I'll see you then.